Okay, so we're going to go over doing some curved text in the design tool. The first thing I want to talk about is the fact that the size of an object on a monitor does not translate to the size of a physical object. So it is a little tricky when you are designing a button, for example, to visualize this as much smaller. The resolution of the monitor I'm using right now is really high, so this button looks like it's the size of my head. It's a 2¼ inch button, so it's actually going to be, a quarter of the size that I'm looking at currently. Like, it'll look different on your monitor because your monitor has a different size, different resolution. So again, the size that you're looking at when you're designing does not correlate in any way to the size of a physical product. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. So to do some curved text, the text we were having some trouble with was this. I'm just going to copy that to my clipboard and paste it in here. And what you want was not for it to go all the way around the button like that, but instead for it to not be 360 degrees, but instead to be 180. So I'm just going to go ahead and maybe not, yeah, okay, maybe you do want 180 or maybe a little more than 180. That looks about right. All right, so I've got 8-point font on here. If, I and my bullet points aren't recognized in this font, so I'm gonna have to delete those. So I just know what an 8-point font looks like when printed, but if you're not sure, you might want to print something out in Word and kind of just take a look at how it looks when printed. Again, it's really difficult to judge the physical size of a thing when you're printing it on when you're designing it on a monitor. So you should look at what 8-point font looks like when printed to kind of get more of a sense of what this is going to look like. So the issue was in the original design that this was the text was unreadable. It was too small. 8 points is still pretty small, although I think this is bigger than what we had originally. But I'm gonna just go ahead and start bumping up the size of the text. And what happens, unfortunately, here is that you start to lose your kerning, and this tool doesn't have the curved text tool doesn't have a kerning option, so you can't actually add any more space between these words. You just kind of have to work within the limitations of this tool. So I'm going to also take these corners and kind of maneuver this to where it's a little bigger. There. I think 14 points is actually pretty good. Now I'm going to go ahead and upload the logo. Let's see if we can remove outer white. It might help. Remove all white. And it's pretty low res, so it's looking a little JPEG-y. So I'm pulling these corners in to make this a little smaller. I might actually also, this is kind of what the original design sort of looked like, only with bigger text and a smaller logo. But I think probably what I'll do is, instead of putting all this text like this, I'm going to do Annual Convention Salt Lake City. I'll just do Annual Convention at the top and then maybe Salt Lake City at the bottom. We'll see what that looks like. Actually, I'm just going to start over because that looked pretty bad. Let's see here. There's my arc. I'm going to re-add it. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And now I'm gonna do another curve text, and I'm going to adjust the angle of the curve to negative 220. Yeah. I'm gonna position that at the bottom. All right. Yeah. And I think like it's still kind of not really great as far as the legibility goes. So what I actually might do is just change this UT to Utah. And I need to make this a little smaller. Maybe even a smidge smaller. And then I'm gonna put, I'm gonna make a new layer that's just straight across text for June 2019. And then I'm gonna make this much smaller and move it down here. Yeah. So the fact that the kerning doesn't match kind of bothers me a little bit, but again, this program has some limitations to it. If you're super picky about this kind of stuff, you might need to use, a different application. But yeah, I think that looks pretty good, and I think it's a little bit more faithful to the intention. All right. And just for kicks, I'm going to go ahead and do a background. So this thing doesn't actually have, it's the way you do a background, like the backgrounds itself are just some solid colors. If you want, you can make your own color, like you can use a color picker by using a shape and then using a circle and then changing the color here. It's a little bit more flexible in terms of the colors that it allows you. So this is a little quirk of the program that, you know, if you want to do like a custom color, you have to use a shape and then set it to be in the background. And there we go. And I'm gonna see if I can maybe even add a stroke on here to kind of liven this up even more. I don't want blue, I want to leave those black. Let me see here. Want like something that kind of matches that orange color maybe. There we go. Yeah, see, that's looking nice. The strokes are a little bit difficult too because they kind of don't translate as correctly. It has to do with pixels, the size of the pixels, and so sometimes what you'll see on a monitor is not quite what your stroke looks like when printed. But again, if you're super particular about these kinds of things, I would recommend using like Photoshop or something like that instead. I'm gonna make sure that my strokes match by selecting a stock color instead of doing that color picker there. Enable stroke, and the stroke color Maybe even on this one, I'll do yellow. No, I'll go back to orange. Anyway, I think this looks a little bit better, and hope that helps. Okay, so here is our finished button, the real actual button. You can see what the stroke looks like, what that creamy background color looks like. It almost looks white against this background, but you can see in the prints that it's actually not white. It just depends on kind of the situation that you're looking at it in. And you can see how tiny that stroke is. It's barely there at all. But, you know, if you look at it close, see if I can focus. You know, you can see it. I don't know how easy it is to see on video, but I can see it in person, and it looks really nice, but it's very subtle. You know, it's a lot more subtle than the way it looked on the monitor. And it's just the nature of designing on a computer versus the way things print in the real world.